Is it so hard to let you go?
Today, ladies and gentlemen, we are in a Volkswagen R32 Golf Mark IV. So, what's really neat about this is that the owner of this car, Ryan, I've known for years. We used to go to little local Richmond car meets together when I lived up here, and we always talked about making a video of his car because, in my opinion, it's one of the cleanest R32 Volkswagens I've ever seen. And this is how you launch an R32. Clutch all the way down, gas all the way down. That was sweet. Yeah, you're not doing that in a GTI. It's funny to me because when I say R32, thankfully I know that there's two different cars for that now, especially in the United States. We really didn't have that problem, if you think about it, until the Skylines really started to be in popularity. So when you say R32, people's brain kind of jumps right to Nissan. But you have to remember, Volkswagen made R32, and they're both all-wheel drive and both have 6 cylinders. So never thought of it that way either. The VR6 that is in the R32, that's what really made this car special. Because with the GTI having a lower displacement motor and it being a 4-cylinder turbo, sure, the GTI Mark IV is a pretty legendary car too. It was very popular in the early 2000s. And to me, it's kind of what opened the door for a lot of people to get into Volkswagens as tuner car platforms in the United States. The R32 was always kind of the one I always wanted to drive because it was all-wheel drive. The other cars were front-wheel drive. Made 240 horsepower from the factory, but this one has some cams in it, so probably around 270 in comparison. It's peppy, naturally aspirated, easy to drive, and the shifter in this, all the bushings have been replaced with solid bushings, and it's very crisp and easy. So instead of having a little bit of play in the shifter like a lot of the Mark IV GTIs had, this takes all of that out. We also have a bolt-in cage in the back, and also let's just talk about the paint on this thing. The paint is still immaculate, but something I've noticed about this when I talked to Ryan about doing this car was his evolution of this car. It went from a factory R32, and over the years I saw him modify it more and more and more. But then at one point we were at a car meet and he said, dude, I'm finally doing it. I go, finally doing what? And he goes, I'm putting bags on this thing. I'm stoked. And I'm like, oh, that's gonna look really nice and clean. Unfortunately, I think I left right after that. I went to Atlanta after that. I never really saw it until I went to European Experience in Savannah, Georgia. That feels nice. But after that, I saw the car on bigger wheels and tires, that sort of thing. And then eventually he said, you know what? I don't want to be paranoid about this anymore, about, you know, leaks and everything else. He never had a leak, thankfully. But it's just one of those things. He wanted to kind of have more fun with the car and not be more on the stance side of things or looking good side of things. So he upgraded to KW V3 coilovers instead to really enjoy what the R32 was truly meant for. All-wheel drive, VR6 fun. What happened was when it launched, you could tell that the traction, or basically it just dead hooked, and it bucked forward when it dead hooked, and then it kind of brought it back up. It's like one of those things where I would get in way too much trouble doing that all the time, so yeah. By the way, everyone who owns a Mark IV, don't do that if it's stock, please, because it's built into the tune. Okay, so the all-wheel drive, what's interesting is I'm used to fighting the wheel up front. I'm used to kind of going like this, doing small little inputs, getting the little torque steer. And with this, it just goes. It's straight as an arrow and it's enjoyable. When you go around corners, you end up having to have the philosophy, instead of pushing it around, you have to keep adding throttle to get it to rotate. It's so weird being in this body that I'm so used to driving, hearing blow-off noises. Bam! And hearing a 4-cylinder with a much more beefy, deep sounding engine. And plus, the VR6 we'll just cover it real quick. It's a really weird engine. Pistons are kind of crisscross like this. They did that to make it more compact and fit in the bay easier to have a V6. And the only other VR6 cars I've driven are the Mark 5 GTI R32. And also a Mark 3 Jetta with a turbocharged VR6 in it. And that sounded really weird. But I have to say, so far, the seating position, the seats, everything about the Mark 4, I'm gonna have to say I like it more than the Mark 5. Even though the Mark 5 is a newer car, I don't know, I feel like this has a more special factor to it. Another thing, wow, I really like the gearing in this thing too. That was rolling into third. I didn't even have to do much to it. But sometimes, I mean only sometimes, I haven't really experienced it too much. If you're really getting on it, really going for it in this thing, the clutch pedal will get a little soft, but it's pretty easy to manage. You don't really notice it too bad. The VR6, as you shift in each gear, and you hear it kind of build up, it makes a sound unlike anything. I can't put my finger on it. You can't really compare it to anything because I don't really think there's any other brand off the top of my head out of all the cars I've driven that has the piston layout that the VR6 does. But that's also why the VR6 is seen as like the hero engine of Volkswagen. A lot of people love these things. When you go to a drag event like World Cup Finals, you'll see an R32 with a built VR6 and a giant turbo on it, and it sounds different than everything else. But so I get the special factor, but I also get the power band. When I did those corners back there, it's easy to manage, and at the same time, it's fun. It has enough pep and power, especially with this cam in it, to actually be taken seriously. You need to be a little careful, but fun at the same time. Another thing too I'd like to add is that it has Porsche brake calipers off of the Porsche Cayenne. It was also on the Volkswagen Touareg, to be fair. But yeah, it's a Porsche brake caliper. I thought that was really fascinating. When I came up to the car today and I just saw these meaty rotors and this giant brake caliper, I was like, well, thankfully today I won't have to worry about that. Because some car reviews you get in, you're like, I can't stop, and that's terrifying. No, so another thing too, as I go over these train tracks, is, hold on. Please hold. Please hold. Is that this is actually the factory muffler on the car, but it's catless. And to me, that's interesting because he actually had an aftermarket one, but he then decided I like the stock one better, did the flapper mod, and just made it catless rather than having the aftermarket. And to me, it's like the perfect volume level because when you're in a higher gear like this, it's quiet, it's bearable. You're not having crazy drone, there's nothing that's vibrating in your ear. Like, for being a catless car, it's definitely manageable to drive every single day. I almost killed a squirrel. So, Volkswagen R32 Mark 4. What do I think of it? It's honestly one of my favorite Volkswagens I've driven. It rides smooth on these coilovers. It drives nice. I like the seating position. I like the visibility. You can see out of it really well. I love how this car looks rolling. It just looks nice and classy, but at the same time, it can hold its own. And you can do Dirty Dan launches with no problem. On that note, I'd love to hear what you guys think about the R32 because it's one of those cars that doesn't get talked about enough in my opinion because it's all-wheel drive, it has a good value for what you're getting, and it has a really fun engine. So, on that note, I want to thank Ryan for letting me drive his car. I had a fantastic time driving this thing. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye! This video is brought to you by Patterson Car Care. Get double of premium original detail product for half the price. Head over to PattersonCarCare.com or go to the link in the description below.